Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says that Ukraine is ready to compromise on joining NATO if its allies, the US among them, provide Kyiv with Article 5-like security guarantees. It comes as German Chancellor Fredrich Merz says that the decades of Pax Americana are largely over. We'll bring you more on that in just a moment, but first, here's more of today's top stories. Released Belarusian political prisoners speak out about the time in Belarusian captivity. Romanians take to the streets over alleged judicial corruption that plagues their system. And the Noble Parcel Christmas Initiative gives hope to those who are most in need. Diplomacy is in its full swing in Berlin today. The same delegation that made it to Moscow over a week ago, involving Special Envoy Witkoff and Trump's son-in-law Kushner, met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy to discuss the revised peace plan. For the latest on that meeting, let's go live to Kyiv, where our correspondent Oz Katerji is standing by. Good evening, Oz. So what do we know about the meeting so far? Any big breakthroughs for Ukraine? Has the subject of Ukraine's NATO membership appeared?
Well, as to whether there are any breakthroughs, we're still waiting to hear of any breakthroughs. This is a long process of negotiation, so it's not the kind of thing that will be expected to be sorted out within one day, even if all the parties did agree, and there is no sign of that. We do have word on compromises Ukraine may be willing to make with regards to its potential future membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. However, it must be said there is some nuance to this position. Let's listen to what Zelenskyy had to say about this in the statement that he released on Sunday.
Ukrainian conditions from the very beginning, or maybe not conditions, but more correctly Ukraine's desire, was to join NATO, and these were real security guarantees. Some partners from the United States of America and Europe did not support this direction. And that is why today bilateral security guarantees between Ukraine and the United States of America, namely Article 5-like guarantees from the United States of America for us, and security guarantees from European colleagues for us, as well as from other countries, Canada, Japan, etc., these security guarantees for us are an opportunity to prevent yet another Russian aggression, and this is a compromise on our part.
Now, the reason why Ukraine wants to join NATO in the first place is that Article 5 guarantee. So Ukraine saying simply that if they are to not pursue their NATO membership currently, they would want security guarantees like Article 5. Now, Article 5 means that if one NATO member is attacked when Article 5 is triggered, all NATO members respond to that attack. So Ukraine is effectively asking for Article 5-like guarantees, which would mean that the United States and other signatories to this deal would go to war on Ukraine's behalf should Russia invade again for a third time. Is this something that's really being offered to Ukraine right now in these negotiations? That's unclear. So this is the context with which Zelensky's comments about NATO need to be understood. Kyiv is saying we are willing to forego pursuing NATO membership at the moment if you offer us basically the same guarantees that NATO would offer us were we a member. So it's a very difficult point to negotiate with the Americans and with Europe.
We also have another interesting development. President Zelenskyy confirmed he will visit Poland next Friday. Could this be the beginning of a better working relationship between the Polish and Ukrainian presidents?
Well, look, from the way Kyiv sees it, Ukraine's relationship with Poland is one of the most important, if not the most important relationship that it has. Poland provides that lifeline, that entry point with which Ukraine can be supplied not just military means, but also humanitarian means. So that relationship between Warsaw and Kyiv is paramount. Now, President Zelenskyy himself said this in another statement released, saying it is very important for us to maintain the relationship between us and Poland. So whatever differences the Polish president and the Ukrainian president may have, Kyiv still very much sees that relationship as being fundamental to its national security. So this is something that Zelenskyy is going to be very keen to make sure the relationship with Warsaw, with the Polish president in particular. The relationship with the prime minister is already pretty strong. It's very much an important part of Ukraine's diplomatic push right now. Remember that while there are difficulties happening with the United States about this potential peace deal, there's still difficulties in Europe with regards to a loan using Russia's frozen assets. So relationships with Kyiv are very, very important for the Ukrainian government right now, which is why Zelenskyy is spending so much time visiting diplomats, visiting foreign capitals, and trying to keep drumming up support for Ukraine's position going forward.
Thank you very much, Oz. That was Oz Kataji reporting live from Kyiv. The decades of Pax Americana are largely over for us in Europe and also for us in Germany. These were the words of German Chancellor Fredrich Merz during his address at the Christian Social Union Party Congress in Munich. His remarks reflect growing concern in Berlin that efforts to build a close working relationship with the current U.S. administration have fallen short. It comes in the context of the newly refreshed U.S. security strategy considered Washington's shift away from the old continent. Our correspondent Paweł Trzaskowski reports on how Europe reached this point.
This is the end of the world as we know it. German Chancellor said it clearly to his party colleagues that the US is now laser-focused on its own interests, regardless of its European partners.
Dear friends, the decades of Pax Americana are largely over for us in Europe and also for us in Germany. It no longer exists as we knew it, and nostalgia is of no help here.
Merz tried to win Trump over at first.
Do you speak English because you speak such good English? Is it as good as your German, would you say? Do you feel more comfortable?
No, it's not my mother tongue, but I try to understand almost everything and to speak as good as I can.
Very good.
And early on, hopes were on the rise, officially.
I very much hope that we will be able to cooperate closely, openly, and with good colleagues from both sides of the Atlantic.
But hopes aside, Germany has been practicing realpolitik for a while now.
So I think everything Mr. Merz has done since winning the elections, he's preparing Germany for the worst-case scenario in which it will have to protect its interests.
Merz's first step, allowing the government more wiggle room in terms of security spending, was loosening the debt brake in March this year. Major defense investments followed, including an ammunition plant in Lithuania, a €4 billion contract for Israeli interceptor missiles, and an almost 5,000-strong contingent on the Suwałki Gap. If the US withdraws from Europe completely, terminating the Pax Americana it has been nurturing since the end of World War II, the new order could see new old great powers emerge. And in Europe, there is a handful of them.
This is going to the old pattern in Europe. It's always been the same powers. It was Russia, it was the United Kingdom, Britain, it was Germany, and it was France.
But the return to this old pattern means that countries outside the world power club are bound to fare worse. Paweł Trzaskowski for TVP World.
All my life, I have tried to be with those who need me. If Belarus needs me, I will try to do something, said Viktar Babaryka, one of the leaders of the Belarusian Democratic Opposition. Babaryka was among 123 political prisoners freed on Saturday. Those released now in Ukraine spoke out for the first time at a press conference that was not broadcast live for security reasons. Randy Potts reports on the background and significance of the release.
Freshly released after 5 years of political imprisonment and torture, Belarusian opposition figure Viktar Babaryka is not lying down.
As for a political career, all my life I have tried to be with those who need me. If Belarus needs me, I will try to do something.
Even as he vowed to fight on, Babaryka took a moment to reflect on the hardships of the last 5 years.
In 2023, as part of my detention conditions, I began to experience uncontrollable loss of consciousness. During one of these episodes, I woke up to find that I had a broken rib, a punctured lung, bilateral pneumonia, and 23 skull fractures.
After the latest 123 political prisoners were released, several of the more prominent figures gave a press conference, closed to the public for safety. For some, healing is the main priority.
I know exactly what my plans are for the coming months. I will continue to be actively busy, meeting with my family, friends, and colleagues. I will focus on my health. What will I do after that? I don't know.
Still, stepping out of detainment centers and buses, the main feeling was joy. Ales Bialatsky, co-winner of the 2022 Nobel Peace Prize and founder of the human rights group Vyasna, have been jailed since 2021.
Well, this morning I was still in prison. I was there in completely different conditions, on a bunk, in a cell with almost 40 people. And now I'm free.
Bialatsky made a point to say he shared his Nobel Prize with all Belarusians working for peace.
This Nobel Prize was given not only to me personally, but to all Belarusian activists and the entire Belarusian people who have advocated and continue to advocate for democracy and human rights.
Even the Nobel Committee weighed in on the gravity of the moment.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee expresses its profound relief and heartfelt joy at the release of Ales Bialatsky.
But one question is still not quite resolved. Why were the Belarusian prisoners released to Ukraine?
Lukashenko is playing his game. And what is important today, Lukashenko showed his power by sending these biggest parts, these very important figures of Belarusian Democratic Forces, as Maxim Znak, as Maria Kolesnikova, as Viktar Babaryka, Pavel Severinets, to Ukraine.
Part of that long game played by Lukashenko has been a year-long back-channel discussion with Washington over U.S. sanctions on Belarusian potash. Before sanctions, state-owned Belarus Kali was a big player on the global market.
A few years ago, Belarus supplied about 20% of the global potash market. Currently, this figure is only about 6%. In monetary terms, we are talking about losses amounting even to several $1 billion annually.
Belarus did manage to maintain and even increase its sales of potash fertilizers to China. However, sales to other markets, including Europe and India, declined severely. And the EU has no plans to change that.
The US makes independent decisions on sanctions against the Belarusian regime, which are not linked to European Union sanctions. There are no discussions in the EU about easing sanctions against the Belarusian regime.
With Europe celebrating the prisoner release while holding the line on sanctions, the difference of opinion with Washington could not be more pronounced.
I think that President Lukashenko, who should get a tremendous amount of credit for this, I think that he is moving. He wants a more normalized relationship with the United States and the West. So we're moving in that direction.
For TVP World, Randy Potts.
This is quite a run-up to Christmas for Romania's Justice Minister Radu Marinescu, as well as the President of the High Court, the Interior Minister, Chief Prosecutors and others in the Romanian justice system, as thousands took it to the streets of the country to demand their resignations on basis of alleged systemic manipulation within the judiciary. The protests came after a detailed documentary showcased alleged abuse of power. Konrad Gorlinski reports.
Following the turbulence of Romania's recent presidential elections, one could have thought the storm was over. But Romanians are back out in the streets of Bucharest and across the country. And it's been 4 days and counting. Protesters demand the resignation of Lia Savonea, president of the High Court, Justice Minister Radu Marinescu, as well as the Interior Minister, chief prosecutors, and others.
I took to the street to say publicly how much I support and how much I appreciate my colleagues who had the courage to come forward.
The judges came forward in this documentary, which came out on Wednesday, released by investigative platform Recorder, titled Captured Justice. It exposed alleged systemic manipulation and influence within the judiciary, including testimony from current and former magistrates about pressure in high-profile corruption cases people had fought for many years. The video has already over 4 million views on YouTube.
The documentary, I think, lays out a case in this sense. For the rest, of course, there is political polarization, depending on each personality's interests, and it remains to be seen if there is going to be any winner camp.
The country's prime minister acknowledged the PR disaster that this is, but fell short of taking any responsibility.
After the changes that were made, the competencies of the Ministry of Justice were mainly transferred to to the Superior Council of the Magistracy in these years. And so the weight of the intervention is today within and at the leadership of the Ministry of Justice.
The Superior Council of the Magistracy, Romania's judicial self-governing body, for its part, frames the allegations as an attempt to weaken and denigrate the judiciary ahead of some very high-profile cases.
We see actions aimed at creating controlled chaos. The synchronization is not accidental. The attacks launched through the statements of Judge Beshu, the anonymous statements of a prosecutor, appear at the moment when serious cases are being finalized and sent to trial.
Meanwhile, over 900 judges and prosecutors have already signed an open letter expressing solidarity with judges who exposed the problems.
I came here to support my colleague Laurențiu Beshu and to say that everything he said is true. If he is contradicted, it is a lie.
So can we expect any changes to come out of this?
Timing is good for judicial reform because there is going to be a series of nominations next year.
However, economic trouble in the country could ironically play into the government's hands in this case.
It remains to be seen in the weeks to come if this is more than an important flame in a discontented environment, because we see discontent in Romania. People are discontent, but I would dare say that it's mostly economic discontent, and the judicial factor can play a role, but it's not the primary, let's say, issue of concern for Romanians right now.
Protesters are gathering at Bucharest's University Square this Sunday evening for yet another march. For TVP World, I'm Conrad Gorlinski.
Everyone has a Christmas wish. Some large, some really small, all of them important. But not everyone can fulfill even their most modest Christmas dreams. This is where Szlachetna Paczka, the noble parcel, saves the day. The initiative provides help for those most in need by donors fortunate enough to be able to share with others. Anastasia Yanchenko brings us this next report.
With Christmas just around the corner, the season of miracles is here, especially for families in need. For one weekend, this school in Warsaw has transferred into the center of hope, one of hundreds across Poland, where Szlachetna Paczka, or noble parcel, comes to life. Hundreds of Christmas parcels are ready to start their journey. Inside each box, more than food or clothing, it's dignity, care, and sometimes child's long-awaited Christmas gift. Here donors are Santas and volunteers, Christmas elves, delivering warmth to every doorstep.
We are deeply moved. We are doing good helping others, families which are facing enormous challenges in their lives.
Despite a drop in Poland's poverty rate from 6.6 to 5.2% this year, around 1.9 million people in the country still live below the poverty line. Living in such conditions for more than 2 months poses a health risk.
Some people cannot afford even basic things. It's very important to remember those who need us, even if it's just a once-a-year charity campaign. For us, it may be a small gesture, but to them, it means the world.
This year's 25th edition of the campaign will support around 20,000 families like Monica's. A single mother of 5 girls, she says providing for them on her own is extremely difficult and that this help is deeply appreciated.
The children were waiting for the packages so eagerly. They were incredibly happy. The girls' dreams came true. The children are happy, and so am I.
The volunteers forge close ties with each of the families they help. Julia still keeps in touch with the family she once supported.
Once I helped Mr. Antoni, who was on the brink of homelessness and struggling with serious health problems. His story moved me deeply. Thanks to the kindness of good people, Antoni now lives in temporary project housing and is waiting for his municipal apartment.
And the donors themselves often return year after year, encouraging their relatives and friends to join the campaign and share kindness and warmth with those in need.
Many people need help, especially during the holidays. Everyone deserves to experience Christmas.
I'm a nurse. Every day I help people and I know how many of them need support. I'm glad that I can help someone.
This is what the world needs more of. A little more care, a little more love, because even the smallest act of kindness can spark the biggest miracles. Anastasia Yanchenko, TVP World.
And returning to our top story tonight, Volodymyr Zelensky's talks with American and European officials in Berlin to discuss. We're joined by Roland Freudenstein, co-founder of Brussels Freedom Hub. Roland, thank you so much. It's always good to have you back on the show.
Good evening.
So, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has said he is ready to give up on demands for NATO membership in exchange for security guarantees from Western allies. Can Ukraine afford to do that? Or we could see, perhaps in the future, another Budapest memorandum outcome take place?
Well, that's precisely what Zelenskyy has set out to prevent. Another Budapest, another empty set of promises of security that then doesn't materialize when push comes to shove. So he's trying to get security guarantees from the United States, Article 5 like they're called, so that the US would have to intervene in some way if Ukraine gets attacked another time. And I think that the demand of the Europeans and the Ukrainians is very much that there will be European boots on the ground in Ukraine. That doesn't have to be under a NATO label, and that certainly works without NATO membership of Ukraine, but these guarantees have to be in place. And, that is going to be one of the next let's say, stumbling blocks in the attempts to get any kind of deal with Russia, because frankly speaking, I can't see Putin agreeing to those ideas at the moment.
I mean, there are constant maximalist demands on behalf of Russia, so there's definitely going to be more discussion around that. But Article 5-like, you said the security guarantees that would be Article 5-like. From your perspective, what do you think those be? What would be those security guarantees that Ukraine would actually be happy to agree to, that the Western allies would have to put their hearts into and their minds?
Well, I mean, Article 5 itself for NATO member states doesn't specify what exactly member states would do if one of them gets attacked, but that they would do something. That they would take measures, and everybody understands that this would be military help. This would be an intervention to defend the attacked country. So if you transfer that to, if you apply that to the case of Ukraine, definitely there would have to be a direct intervention, for example, air support for Ukrainian troops, for example, an increased logistical help for Ukraine's efforts to defend itself. For example, all the continuation of intelligence support and satellite imagery, which is happening today, that all this would definitely happen in the case of another attack on Ukraine. And if you take it to its logical end, an Article 5-like security guarantee from Ukraine for Ukraine by the United States would actually mean that even US extended nuclear deterrence would have to be part of the game, because it is in the case of NATO. So, these are all the potential reactions of Ukraine's allies in case of a renewed attack on Ukraine.
It has also been confirmed, as we know, that President Zelenskyy is planning to come over to Poland this coming Friday to meet with President Nawrocki. And obviously, we know that there have been certain differences between the two presidents when it comes to their diplomatic lines. Would you consider this announcement of President Zelenskyy coming over to Poland already a diplomatic success, or we're not yet out of the deep water?
Well, first of all, it's overdue. I think that or let's say a meeting between current presidents is overdue. The relationship between Andrzej Duda and Volodymyr Zelenskyy was rather cordial, but that doesn't seem to be the case with Karol Nawrocki. So I think that Volodymyr Zelenskyy has all the interest in the world to deepen that personal relationship, to clarify a couple of things in person, and also to discuss not only the details of Poland's crucial support for Ukraine in military terms, but also to talk about the refugees, the Ukrainian refugees in Poland, and talk about Polish-Ukrainian differences, about the nitty-gritty details of Ukraine's future accession to the European Union. And last but not least, there are a couple of open points, I would say, in terms of coming to terms with the painful history between Poland and Ukraine. So overcoming the painful past, doing everything to work towards a common European future in the European Union together. I mean, these will be the topics of the visit.
So you've spoken about the importance of Poland as Ukraine's ally, but we've also seen meetings take place of the Coalition of the Willing or the Allied West for the Ukrainian cause. For example, the latest meeting in London, but we did not have any representation from Poland. Do you think that this meeting that will take place between two presidents could potentially get Poland closer to being present in those very important conversations regarding the future of Ukraine? That is going to affect Poland in many ways as well.
Yeah, I mean, that would presuppose practically that Nawrocki talks Zelenskyy into advocating for Polish membership in the Coalition of the Willing, or the E3, actually, Britain, France, Germany, that at the moment seem to be calling the shots when it comes to Europe's position in all this. This could happen, but I think the reason Poland is not part of that group is not the question of lack of Ukrainian advocacy. It is rather the difficult situation between the government and the president in Poland itself. At the beginning of Poland's EU Council presidency for the first half of this year, I mean, there was every argument for Poland to be in the top group, if you want, in the steering committee of the Coalition of the Willing to support Ukraine. Why has that not come into being? I think it's largely because of the difficult domestic situation in Poland. And if the Polish government and the president could find a way to improve their relations and come to a more constructive position vis-a-vis the outside world, I think it would be no problem at all to have Poland as part of this enlarged leadership committee in Europe. Because Poland belongs there, that is absolutely true. But the reason for that is not to be found in the Polish-Ukrainian relationship, but rather in the vagaries of Polish domestic politics.
I would also like to bring a quote from German Chancellor Fredrich Merz. He said, quote, "The decades of Pax Americana are largely over for us in Europe and for us in Germany as well. It no longer exists as we knew it. The Americans are now very, very aggressively pursuing their own interest, and that can only mean one thing, that we, too, must now pursue our own interest. And dear friends, we are not so weak after all," end quote. So that was Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Is this something that Europe was actually ready for, something that Europe was ready to embrace, this shift in the policy of the U.S. Trump administration?
Well, we've seen a lot of moments of shift of the U.S. administration over the last 11 months, right? So, you know, we have this Groundhog Day experience, this constantly repeating a phenomenon of the United States throwing out a statement, and the one that Merz was referring to, obviously, was the national security strategy about 9 days ago, and we have the reaction of the Europeans who seem to be in a panic mode and say that, but now really we have to get our act together. Well, we've been through this a couple of times now. And I think that we are getting closer to a state of affairs where Europe takes its fate into its own hands, but we're not there yet. And Merz's declaration that we can't rely on the United States forever has also been made several times by himself, and even to an extent by Angela Merkel several times. So, you know, it's the real question is whether Europe, instead of making statements like this, finally does something. And here, I would say the jury is still out. We're making progress, but we're not there yet. And Merz himself, in other parts of his statement, his speech in Munich on Friday morning, actually said that we will be dependent on the United States for certain things, such as, for example, nuclear deterrence, for a while to come. There are other parts of defense and military security where we are still not completely autonomous. But we have to start seriously making efforts to get there. And that process has only begun.
And that process has only begun. Roland, thank you so much for joining me on the program. Roland Freudenstein, co-founder of Brussels Freedom Hub, was my guest tonight on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so this would be all the latest news for now here on World News Tonight. I'm Klaudia Czerwińska. Thank you so much for joining me, and I wish you all a very good night.